Back in the 2009 draft, one of the most hyped pitching prospects of all time, Stephen Strasburg, was drafted number 1 overall by the Washington Nationals. While Strasburg did go on to have a solid career and help the Nats win it all in 2019, his career wasn't as impactful than another player in that same draft. Mike Trout, who was drafted at number 25, has put together a Hall of Fame caliber career, while Strasburg was forced into early retirement due to nerve issues in his arm. In this video, I go into an alternate universe in which Mike Trout was drafted number 1 overall. Let's get to it. Let's start from the beginning and go straight to the 2009 MLB draft. In this universe, we're going to see Mike Trout drafted in the number 1 position. So that means instead of going to the Angels, he would go to the Washington Nationals. For the sake of this video, everyone else will slide down 1 spot, which means we'll see some other significant players going to other teams. Stephen Strasburg would slide down to the number 2 spot, going to the Mariners. Zach Wheeler would slide down to the number 7 spot, going to the Atlanta Braves. And the Angels would end up drafting Randal Grichuk at number 25 instead. One big event that happened in reality was Stephen Strasburg making his debut with the Nationals. However, in this universe, we would see him make his debut with the Seattle Mariners. This means we would never have seen his electric debut against the Pirates, in which he struck out 14 batters. Instead, he would have made his debut that year a couple weeks later against the Milwaukee Brewers, throwing 7 shutout innings with 10 strikeouts. The debut of Strasburg in Seattle wasn't the only significant event to happen in this universe in 2010, as the Nationals would still go on to draft Bryce Harper just like they did in reality. We begin 2011 in this universe with the star of the show, Mike Trout, who would make his debut with the Nationals. Ultimately, though, he wouldn't make much of a difference for the Nationals this season, but fans in Washington were able to get a glimpse of what he was about to embark on in the future. There were a couple other slight notes of significance in this universe in the year 2011. The first one was, since the Nationals had Trout in the majors and Harper down in the minors, the Nationals would not end up signing Jason Worth, since they already had Michael Morse, and instead Worth would end up signing with the Angels. With the Nationals not possessing a top of the rotation in this universe like they had with Strasburg in reality, they would go on to sign starter Cliff Lee instead of seeing him return to the Phillies. This would mean the Phillies in 2011 would win 93 games instead of 102 when you factor in Cliff Lee's wins above replacement of 9. As for the Nationals, when you factor in Lee's wins above replacement, they would have finished with 89 wins instead of 80, but they would still just miss the playoffs. This would also mean that the Brewers would have finished with the best record in the National League instead, so we would have seen the Brewers go up against the Phillies, while the Diamondbacks would go up against the wild card winning Cardinals. With the Phillies still having a very good top 3 of Roy Halladay, Cole Hamels, and Roy Oswalt, they would still be able to beat the Brewers and advance to the championship series instead of losing to the Cardinals in the first round like they actually did. The Cardinals would be able to beat the Diamondbacks, and we would see a Phillies-Cardinals National League Championship Series. While the Cardinals were able to beat the Phillies in reality in the division series, the Phillies would instead prevail in this universe due to the fact that they had a deeper rotation than the Cardinals did, which would serve them better in a 7-game series. In the World Series, we would see the Phillies versus the Rangers, and in this universe, the Phillies would win the World Series as their starting pitching would be too deep for the Rangers. So, believe it or not getting Cliff Lee would have actually benefited the Phillies in 2011. In reality this season, Bryce Harper would debut for the Nationals and go on to have a solid campaign, while the Nationals finished with a record of 98-64 to win the National League East. However, in this universe, Trout would be the full-time center fielder with Harper in right and Morse in left. Trout would have an incredible rookie season like he did in reality, finishing with a wins above replacement of 10.5. This would mean that Trout would have won the National League Rookie of the Year instead of Harper, and Yoenis Cespedes would have won the American League Rookie of the Year. As for the Nationals, this would mean that when you account for Trout's 10.5 wins above replacement minus the wins above replacement of Stephen Strasburg, who's now on the Mariners in this universe, universe, the Nationals would have instead finished with a record of 104-58. Nothing would change when it came to the playoff seedings, but with Cliff Lee in the fold for Washington, who were without Strasburg in reality due to his innings limit that season, they would be able to beat the Cardinals in 5 games and instead advance to face the San Francisco Giants in the championship series. In the NLCS, with the Nationals having a solid top 3 of Cliff Lee, Gio Gonzalez, and Jordan Zimmermann, along with an amazing 1-2 punch of Harper and Trout in the middle of the lineup, the Nationals would be able to get past the Giants in 7 games, who beat the Cardinals in 7 games in reality. They would then move on to the World Series to face the Tigers, and they would handle them easily, winning their first World Series in franchise history. With Mike Trout putting together another solid season that compiled about 9 wins total, along with another stellar season from Cliff Lee that saw wins above replacement of 6.5, the Nationals would be a much better team in 2013. When you factor in that Jason Worth would be on the Angels in this universe, this would give the Nationals, who missed the playoffs with a record of 86-76 in reality, a record of 97-65. This would be just enough to edge out the Atlanta Braves for the National League East. This would mean that the Braves and the Pirates would play in the wild card game, in which the Braves would win. This would mean that the Cardinals would face the Braves, while the Nationals would face the Dodgers in the division series round. Even though the Cardinals would be playing the Braves in this universe instead, they would still be strong enough to advance to the NLCS. As for the Dodgers, while they were able to get by the Braves in reality, in this universe, the Nationals' rotation of Cliff Lee, Jordan Zimmermann, and Gio Gonzalez would be too strong, and the Nats would advance to their 2nd straight NLCS. In reality, we saw the Cardinals get by the Dodgers in 6 games, but in this universe, the Nationals' strong 1-2-3 punch of Lee, Zimmermann, and Gonzalez, and their lineup with Trout and Harper would be too much to handle, meaning the Nats would advance to their 2nd straight World Series. In the World Series, we would see the Red Sox and Nationals. While the Nats had enough magic to get back to a 2nd straight World Series, the Red Sox simply just had too much magic that season and postseason, and they would still find a way to win it all, but this time in 7 games. We start 2014 with the free agency of Mike Trout coming up within the next couple of years, and just like he did in reality, he would sign an extension with the Nationals. With Mike Trout firmly entrenched in the Nationals outfield instead of Jason Worth, Steven Strasburg, the ace of the Seattle Mariners, and Cliff Lee having a down year before heading off into retirement, the Nationals would finish with the same record of 96-66. Without enough effective starting pitching, the Nationals would still endure an early exit at the hands of the San Francisco Giants. Speaking of Strasburg, he would actually make the biggest difference in 2014 in this universe. In reality, the 2014 Mariners finished with a record of 87-75. However, with Strasburg now entrenched as the Mariners' ace, he would help lead the Mariners to 3 more wins and to a record of 90-72, along with a spot in the wild card game instead of the Oakland A's against the Kansas City Royals. In the wild card game, we would see a matchup of Felix Hernandez against James Shields, and because Felix Hernandez was so darn good in 2014, the Mariners would actually overcome the Royals and advance to the division round to face the Angels, who would still win the AL West even without Mike Trout. In the division round, with the Mariners possessing a much better pitching staff than the Angels with Felix Hernandez, Steven Strasburg, and Hisashi Iwakuma, and Chris Young, as well as playing the Angels well that year, they would beat the Angels in 4 games and advance to the ALCS to face the Orioles. With that pitching, they would also get by the Orioles and face the San Francisco Giants in the World Series. While the Giants did have an epic 7-game series with the Royals, in reality, they would also have an epic 7-game series with the Mariners. But because of that pitching led by Felix Hernandez and Steven Strasburg, the Mariners would end up winning the World Series in 7 games. With Mike Trout still in the fold with the Nationals instead of Jason Worth, they would have a much better record of 92-70 instead of the 83-79 record they actually finished with. This is due to the fact that Trout had a wins above replacement of about 9, while Jason Worth had a wins above replacement of -1.5. along with subtracting Strasburg's numbers since he is with Seattle. With Bryce Harper's MVP season combined with Trout's phenomenal season as well, the Nationals would win the National League East instead of the Mets that year. So we would have never have seen the Mets make it to the World Series in 2015. We would have seen the Nationals versus the Dodgers in the division round. With the Dodgers led by Clayton Kershaw and Zack Greinke, they would be able to get past the Nationals in 5 games, advancing to the championship round to face the Cubs. While the Cubs did have Jake Arrieta and Jon Lester atop their rotation, the Dodgers duo of Kershaw and Greinke would be just too much, as the Dodgers would go on to face the Royals in the World Series. While the Dodgers did have some talented starting pitching with Kershaw and Greinke and a much better offense, the Royals were just a deeper team and they had an awesome bullpen. They would still hang on to beat the Dodgers in 6 games. This would be another very good year for the Nationals as they got an MVP season for Mike Trout. When you factor in Trout's wins above replacement of 10.5 while also subtracting Strasburg's wins above replacement of 3.4 since he's with Seattle, the Nationals would finish with 7 more wins and a record of 102-60 instead of the 95-67 record they finished with in reality. They would still face the Dodgers, which in reality was a close series that saw 4 of the 5 games be decided by 1 run, and the Dodgers moving on. However, with Mike Trout, the Nationals' offense would be too good, and the Nationals would move on to face the Cubs in the National League Championship Series. While we would see a competitive series between the Cubs and the Nationals, the Cubs with Jon Lester, Jake Arrieta, and Kyle Hendricks would prove to be too much. They would still move on to the World Series, which they would still win for the first time since 1908. 2017 was another year of Mike Trout and Bryce Harper having very good seasons for the Nationals. When we take out Jason Worth and Steven Strasburg from the 2017 Nationals and add in Mike Trout, we would see the Nationals still finish with a record of 97-65, winning the National League East and facing the Cubs in the division round. In reality, this series went 5 games, with a couple of the games being decided by 1 run. With Trout, though, the Nationals would have enough offense to be able to win this series in this universe compared to the Cubs winning it in 5 games in reality. So, instead of the Cubs, it would be the Nationals that would move on to face the Dodgers in the championship round. However, the Dodgers would still prove to be too much as they would win this series in 6 games, moving on to face the Astros, where they would still fall in 7 games. We enter 2018 with Bryce Harper 1 year away from free agency while Mike Trout was coming up in a couple of years. We would also see the promotion of another Nationals top prospect, Juan Soto, who would debut in late May, giving the Nationals an outfield that year of Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, and Juan Soto. Good grief, with Trout posting a wins above replacement of about 10 in 2018, and if you take out the combined 4 wins between Steven Strasburg and Michael Taylor, this would give the Nationals a record of 88-74. In reality, the Braves would have won 90 games to win the NL East, but with Trout in the lineup for the Nationals would have won a couple more games against the Braves that season, making them tied for the National League East. In the 1-game playoff, the Nationals would have Max Scherzer, who would make his regular turn in the rotation considering he had pitched 5 days before this in reality. He would go up against Sean Newcomb, and because of how dominant Scherzer was this season, the Nationals would win this game and advance to the playoffs instead of the Braves to face the Dodgers in the division round. However, with Max Scherzer used up in the 1-game playoff and with the Dodgers possessing a better overall rotation, the Dodgers would still move on and would still eventually lose to the Red Sox in the World Series. The Nationals head into this offseason coming off yet another exit from the playoffs, and they have their eyes set on getting a starting pitcher, considering their pitching has fallen short in the last couple years. With Bryce Harper coming off the books and departing for the Phillies, the Nationals would have some money to play with. While they would still get Patrick Corbin, they would have the money to go get one more starting pitcher, and that would be Charlie Morton, who wanted to stay close to his family at the time. This would mean that he would have not gone to the Rays. Considering he had a wins above replacement of of about 5 in 2019, the Rays would have actually had won 91 games instead of 96, meaning they would have missed the playoffs. And instead, we would have seen the Indians and the Athletics face off in the wildcard game. With the A's not having to go up against a big game picture in Charlie Morton, we would see the A's beat the Indians and move on to face the Astros in the division round. However, while the A's did play the Astros well down the stretch in 2019, they would still lose this series in 5 games, and the Astros still defeat the Yankees in the ALCS to move on to the World Series. As for the Nationals, we would see the Nationals finish with 93 wins in reality, but in this universe, when you factor in Mike Trout's and Charlie Morton's wins above replacement, with the subtraction of Steven Strasburg's wins above replacement of about 6, we would see the Nationals finish with 100 wins. This would mean that they would have won the National League East, and we would have never have seen that epic wildcard game between the Brewers and the Nationals. Instead, we would see the Braves versus the Brewers in this wildcard game. In reality, we would see Juan Soto get the base hit to drive in the 3 go-ahead runs, but in this universe, Josh Hader would be able to shut down the Braves, as the Braves only hit .255 against lefties in 2019. This would mean that the Brewers would move on to the division round as the wild card to face the Dodgers, while the Nationals would play the Cardinals. While the Dodgers in reality would fall to the Nationals in the division round, they would instead move on to the championship series, being able to get by the Brewers in 4 games, while the Nationals would be able to handle the Cardinals in 5 games. In the National League Championship Series, we would see the Dodgers and the Nationals. This would be a high-powered series between 2 really good teams who each won 100 games. While the Nationals were able to get by the Dodgers in 5 games, in reality, I think in 7 games in this universe, with the Dodgers having deeper starting pitching and with Kershaw not coming into Game 5 from the bullpen like he did in reality, the Dodgers would find a way to win this series in 7 games. In the World Series, we would see a rematch of the 2017 World Series between the Astros and the Dodgers, who were in their 3rd straight World Series. With the Dodgers possessing a deeper starting pitching staff than the Astros in this series, along with an offense and a bullpen that could also match up with the Astros, we would see the Dodgers win this series in 7 games and win their first World Series since 1988. They would then move on to still win the World Series in 2020, becoming the first back-to-back champions since the Yankees in the year 2000. With the Nationals unwilling to meet Bryce Harper on a long-term contract, they would still do the same with Mike Trout. They would try to hang on to him with a 10-year deal, but it wasn't close to what Trout was looking for. So who does Mike Trout end up signing with? Well, there's a team out there with an owner looking to win at all costs, and with money to spend, Mike Trout would sign with the New York Mets. So that's what I think what would have happened if Mike Trout was drafted number 1 overall in 2009. Let me know down below in the comments, what do you think would have happened if he was taken number 1? But that's all I have for this video. If you can on the way out, hit that like button for me, subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you next time.